question that institution. It's wildly popular in California. The reason nobody has introduced a popular initiative to ban the popular initiative is they know it would lose overwhelmingly in certain things like term limits. The only states that have term limits are those that have the popular initiative. No legislature is going to propose it, or the periodic constitutional convention. California has the most effective independent redistricting system now because it was done through popular initiative. You don't have that in New York. So there are problems, but there are good things. And the public likes it. They love it in California, even though you can make many good arguments that it has significant
problems. And I would say this too about the term limits issue. Many political science studies also show that states that have adopted term limits are ditching them because they don't work. What term limits end up doing is putting power in the hands of staff and interest groups and not in the hands of elected officials. There's no way you can vote a staffer or an interest group out of office. You can vote an elected official out of office. What those states that have ditched it have turned to is campaign finance reform and other reforms that are more the fly swatter that's needed rather than the sledgehammer to kill the fly on the wall. So yeah, popular initiative and referendum can be a very good thing, and it is popular, but also ask some Californians about how much money from outside the state was spent on the petition drives to put Proposition 8 and other ballot initiatives on the ballot. It became a mechanism where citizens lost control of the process, and though they like it in concept, in practice there's much less support for it than you might think.
Thank you. You in the last row.
Okay. I think the feeling that we've got this process and we may as well go forward with it, when I think most of the people in this room would agree the selection process stinks. Okay? You cannot have a fair representation if we're going to use the system that's in place, which favors the way we already picked our legislators. You have to be an established party, you have to have the money. Money talks. There is no average citizen that is going to be able to go and say, oh, I'm going to get myself elected. You're not going to be. You couldn't give up your job for the year or two or whatever it is. So who's got the money to do that? The people that are already in the system, who know how to game the system up. Most of us wouldn't even know how to go get a petition. What are the rules for petitions? Where do I hand them in? Who can I get the list from? It's set up for the people that are already in the system. So please do not tell me that I should go ahead and have this and hope that when it actually comes to a vote, first of all, there's no guarantee how it comes to a vote. They could have a horrendous thing in there, put them all into one yes or no. Okay? If I had something that I knew most people did not like, I would lump it with a whole bunch of things that the people want. And we would have one up and down vote. It does not tell us how they have to put it on the ballot. They can decide how to put it on the ballot. I do not have the confidence in the system because of the way they're being selected. If we could fix, and it'd be a true people's convention, because the selection process would be more transparent and more fair, fine. But I am not going to put my faith in the system that we've already got in place to pick rational people to come up with something that was good for everybody.
Should we respond, or?
Yes, if you'd like to.
I just want to say there are no guarantees in the democratic process. The Supreme Court, these 9 unelected individuals who have life terms, they could tomorrow turn around and rule anything. They could do anything they wanted, and there would be no check on it. The legislature could raise, they could tax you 100% of your income and take away all your property. This is the way democracy works, but they don't, because they want to get elected. Here, the major check is all this body can do is propose things, and you can vote, if you don't like it, you vote it down. And one of the most remarkable things that I have found through studying these conventions, and I showed a whole sorts of, a bunch of documentaries at the American Political Science Association, is whenever they look at these conventions retrospectively, they make them into these wonderful hagiographic things with wonderful statesmen and leaders in them. And then, so that's one. And we're talking about many in the 20th century. You look back retrospectively, we think they were great conventions, but then when you look forward, there's all this concern about what might happen. And anyway, there are no guarantees, but at the end of the process, you can just veto the whole thing. So the worst case scenario just isn't there. And I think you have to have some trust in the people to do that.
I have trust in the people, I just don't have trust in the system.
Yeah.
Yes. Dora, you've been waving your hand a while.
I just want to say this. I agree with Jim. I'm a history teacher. In theory, I think a constitutional convention. In theory, in a perfect world, that would be what we want. But if we lived in a perfect world, we wouldn't have the leader of our nation baiting North Korea. So we live in the political climate we have now. And you said, we could vote it down. In 1967, they rolled it all into one, including a repeal of the Blaine Amendment, which would have allowed public money to go to private parochial schools. It was voted down. So, okay, so maybe that's good then. But it cost $50 million. And the delegates there received salaries and pensions. So if, like Nancy said, if we knew that the process worked, not only do we not believe in the delegate selection, but the process itself. Once those delegates are elected, they decide how the process works. They decide the duration, the scope, how long, where they meet. That is entirely their decision. Am I right?
Well, just like any legislature, it's always the prerogative of a body to turn its internal procedures, because otherwise the checks and balance system would be violated. So you have to give them control over their internal control. Nobody can say how the committee system of Congress is structured or how they elect the chair. That's an internal issue to the public body.
Parameters could be set though. I don't see why that has to be a given. Why parameters couldn't be set ahead of time. Right now we're asked to engage in this civic wonder without any information other than it's democracy. And like Jim said, I'm agreeing with you twice here, Jim.
Yeah.
There is so much to lose. There is so much at risk. And at this point in time, I don't know that anybody in this room would give that trust over to delegates. And you said that, only a couple of them, 3%, but the leader, the president of the convention was also the speaker of the assembly. Most of the people had either connections, law connections, or political connections. They certainly weren't Dora Leland teaching middle school in 7th grade. So if you look at the true demographics of that 67 convention, they didn't represent the people that they were elected for.
I'd like to follow up on that too. Before I came here tonight, I went to the League of Women Voters analysis of the 67 convention, okay? 70% of them were lawyers, according to the League of Women Voters. More than half were over 50 years old. Only 33 were under 40. New York City and the suburbs commanded 62% of the delegates. Rural areas only got represented by 24% of the delegates, and this was in '67. I'm sure the percentage of rural delegates is going to be even smaller given the population decline. So it may benefit certain segments of the society. We have a fairly progressive, I would view, constitution. But I agree with that, Jim, that this is not the climate. This is the most partisan divide that I've seen since the Vietnam War, actually. I never thought I would see what is happening at the federal level, where I see every department, from education to environment to stuff, where people are being installed to undermine the mission of that agency. So you bring up a point that you know, with Citizens United, that the easiest thing is to kill something and da-da-da-da-da. I somewhat understand the point that was being made earlier, okay? That for me, if you want to be a delegate, I'm sure that money from outside of New York is going to come in because of the interest that potentially is at play here. Your whole Constitution's up in the air. So I can see a scenario where enough progressive goodies are put in to maybe take care of downstate, da-da-da-da-da. But I can also see a scenario where there is limits imposed on potentially upstate, you know, that would pass if it's done as a whole. You're right, we get to vote potentially if it's at, every proposal is broken down. And the thing that gets me even about this election is you're gonna have every delegate running out there, anti-corruption, transparency, but correct me if I'm wrong, with the last constitutional there were a couple of hot button issues that delegates ran on. I think Blaine was one, okay? But I think they came out with 24 or something like, I don't recall the exact number of amendments that weren't even part of the discussion during the election cycle. That's not true?
No. But even if it was true, unlike a legislative proposed amendment where it's done, you know, just before the legislature recesses, it's out there for the public for 6 weeks or more to look at. But everything that was in there was discussed. But that's a secondary issue.
Not during the election cycle. When you're electing these delegates, yes, eventually,
sure, yeah.
When you're electing these delegates, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. What I'm saying is what actually gets put on the table, okay, you don't know. You don't know what is going to be proposed.
Just, I consider that good. In fact, I consider it highly detrimental when people talk about the specifics so much and the public expects that. When George Washington, who's part of the Federal Constitutional Convention, he had almost no idea what was going to be discussed there. He went in there to listen and learn. Most of the issues he hadn't thought about at all. And I think what you really want in a delegate is a thoughtful person. You can't possibly know all the issues. And even if you did, people like Madison came into that convention with an agenda. By the time he was done, the Federal Constitution looked very different than anything he thought. What you want are thoughtful people who can absorb information and whatnot. So it's a premise.
That's back in the day when you had statesmen and not politicians.
Okay, but the basic question that I would like is, in New York, the debate is heavily focused on the 1967 precedent. I think it's a useful precedent, but remember, we've had 236 state constitutional conventions in America. And it would be like, you know, when the Yankees lose a game, to infer because they lost one game, they're going to lose the rest of the season and they didn't learn anything from that game. I would encourage you to look at, say, the 1970 Illinois State Constitutional Convention. Illinois, Chicago's the second largest city, it was then after New York. I consider that a very successful convention. I think they had 1.9% incumbent legislators there. One of the people who was active in the campaign was the chair. They did the conventional approach of having multiple amendments, a non-controversial bunch, and then they put the controversial ones in separate amendments. So you don't just have to pick that one. I mean, it's New York, but there are many other examples to learn from. You shouldn't focus too much on just one example.
Since that was the last one.
I know, it's
You
a
naturally
logical
refer to
one, but there's many others that have happened since then and before then that I think should be also reference points as part of the discussion. That's my only point about that.
Thank you. Another question, please?
From hearing the discussion that's going on in the group, I guess my feeling is posing to you as our resident experts is we have two other proposals that are going to be on the ballot. Why aren't we focusing for next year's vote that we write another proposal to, like the corruption and the land deal, that we overhaul our current system So these 204 people are appointed or elected, however, in a more democratic fashion. And the two of you obviously have lots of ideas on how that could happen, so that there's more equality and we're not having people that are going to be immediately left out of the process. So why aren't we writing something or proposing something that say, right now, we're going to vote no because it's stacked against
Well, it's
us
a
or feeling
catch-22
that.
situation. The
But we can write a
legislature would
proposal.
never propose the type of things that you'd like to see. So it's a great idea, except it's a catch-22.
But if we put enough heat under them to do it,
Well, that's the thing. In next year's election cycle, assume for a moment that the referendum is defeated. And
right,
we want to go in the direction you're talking about because we do have a constitution that probably could use some serious reform.
right.
But we're afraid of what might happen in a convention that could run away. If we want to make sure that it's more representative of the people, and we want to change the process, then the day after Election Day this year, it's up to groups and communities
To
to start getting together and
start
say, this
heating
is
up
what we
that
want.
pot.
And beat up your representatives
Yes.
in the Assembly and in the Senate, and say, we want a proposition on the ballot to change the way a constitutional convention is established.
But you two are our resident experts. We need something that we can put in front of them, because we all know, if you go to your boss, you go to your principal, you go to whoever's in head, and you say, this is a problem, and it needs to be fixed, and look, I have these 3 possible solutions of what we could do, they're gonna listen much more than if we say, we got a problem, fix it. We need to have something in hand to give them.
I have written 2 op-eds exactly on that subject, that I advocate something that's going to be beyond here, because we don't have it in the United States. I recommend a mixed member proportional system, which Germany and New Zealand have, which I think is the best type of electoral system for a delegate selection process. We discussed that a little bit, but that would be way too technical to discuss here. But I cannot imagine the legislature doing that. That's just, in terms of the world. The reason we have a checks and balance system is because we recognize that each branch has some conflicts.
But the power of the media can put a whole lot of heat on them.
Hopefully, yeah.
I'll be talking about this subject tomorrow night.
Okay.
Regular segment Politics in 2.
Excuse me, but there is a resource sheet at the back of the room which lists several sources, but also the one article that this Jim is talking about. It's the best way to select delegates. So if you look that up, then you can read more about this system he's talking about.
That would be great, thank you.
Mhm.